For just a few moments after the blade dropped, Anne Bennett's severed head might have remained aware, a terrifying glimpse into the final moments of the woman for whom Henry VIII, left unchanged as a historical figure, broke away from the Church of England. How did the Queen, who once disrupted an entire nation for the king's desire, end up at the executioner's block? On May 19, 1536, dawn broke behind heavy gray clouds, bathing the Tower of London in a pale light. This imposing stone fortress towered over the city, symbolizing both authority and tragedy. In the courtyard, a scaffold had been constructed overnight, not the usual tall platform for executions, but a shorter, quieter one. It was specially designed to suit the style of a foreign swordsman, wielding a blade unlike any seen before in England. This was far from an ordinary execution. Soft murmurs circulated swiftly through the morning air, passing between servants, guards, and anyone brave enough to speak. Today, something unprecedented in English history was about to happen. For the first time, a queen, once crowned and revered, would face death by the sword. Her name was Anne Bennet. She had once won King Henry VIII's heart and overturned his world. For her, he challenged the Pope, defied the Emperor, and risked the wrath of his subjects. Anne was more than his lover. She was instrumental in severing England from the Catholic Church and igniting the English Reformation. Yet now, that same woman was no longer a queen. The law branded her a traitor within the cold walls of the fortress. Within the tower's walls, in a small chamber where she had spent the previous 17 days, Anne Bennet awoke to her final dawn. The world beyond remained quiet and motionless, anticipating what was to unfold. She was 35 years old, and although her crown had been stripped away and betrayal enveloped her, Anne Bennet still possessed the grace and refinement that had once captivated an entire royal court. On the morning of her execution, she stood with composed dignity. A handful of loyal ladies stayed close, assisting her in preparing for her last public appearance, ensuring every detail of her attire was meticulously selected. She wore a somber gray cloak lined with fur, solemn and fitting for the gravity of the day. Beneath it, she donned a deep crimson bodice. This was not a fashion choice, but a strategic decision to conceal the blood that would soon be shed. It was not vanity, but a symbol of resilience, a final demonstration of bravery in the face of death. As Anne dressed, she displayed no apprehension. Instead, she uttered a quiet, eerie comment. "I hear the executioner is very skilled. I have a little neck," as she gently touched her slender throat. This moment, recalled by those present, revealed her dark humor and sharp intellect. Even confronting death, she maintained her bravery, prepared to meet her fate as she had lived, with audacity, pride, and unbroken spirit. But how did this come to pass? How had the woman who once captured the heart of England's king found herself kneeling before a foreign sword? Anne Bennet's tale did not start with a crown. It began with ambition. She was the daughter of Thomas Bennet. Anne Bennet was a clever and ambitious diplomat closely linked to Elizabeth Howard, a member of one of England's most influential families. From a young age, Anne was immersed in the elegance and splendor of European courts. She received her education in the Netherlands and served at the French court of Queen Claude, where she absorbed the language, customs, and Renaissance ideas. Upon her return to England around the year 1522, Anne did not fit the usual standards of beauty. She possessed olive-colored skin, long dark hair, and intense black eyes, quite different from the pale skin and blonde hair admired in Tudor England. However, she displayed something far more compelling: intelligence, self-assurance, and charisma that captivated everyone around her. Without uttering many words, Anne soon attracted the attention of the most powerful figure in the country, King Henry IV, оставлено без изменений, так как исторический персонаж. At the time, Henry was still married to Catherine of Aragon, but their union had failed to produce a male heir, which increasingly frustrated him. When Henry attempted to make Anne his mistress, she refused, unlike her sister Mary Bennet, who had followed that path. Anne famously declared to the king, "If you want my body, you must give me a crown." This was a daring and nearly unimaginable request. Despite that, Henry became obsessed with her. What followed was a pursuit lasting 7 years, filled with political turmoil. Determined to make Anne queen, Henry asked the Pope for a divorce, but when the request was denied, Henry broke from the Catholic Church. He established the Church of England and declared himself its supreme head, an act that changed history forever. What began as a matter of love quickly transformed into a political and religious upheaval that forever altered English history. In January of 1533, Henry III, оставлено без изменений, так как исторический персонаж, and Anne Bennett secretly wed. Anne was already expecting a child, and both eagerly hoped for a son. However, when in September a daughter named Elizabeth was born, the king's disappointment was profound. Nevertheless, Anne was crowned queen. Her coronation was magnificent, and for a time, her status appeared stable. As queen, Anne was far from silent. She championed religious reform, helped ensure that the Bible was accessible in English, and surrounded herself with intelligent and visionary thinkers. She believed firmly in her role and her entitlement to the crown. Yet her assertiveness made her many adversaries. The traditional noble families despised her, Catholics blamed her for the break from Rome, and even within her own household, spies and betrayers lurked. Her fall did not begin with scandal, but with sorrow. After Elizabeth's birth, Anne became pregnant again, but in 1534 she suffered a miscarriage. The immense pressure to produce a male heir was overwhelming, and Henry's affection for her started to wane. The atmosphere at court grew chilly. Early in 1536, Anne became pregnant once more, but tragically lost the baby yet again. Some believed the heartbreak followed news of Henry's severe injury during a jousting accident. Many thought that the stress of these events caused the loss of the child, whom she might have believed to be a boy. This was a devastating period for Anne, both in her role as a mother and as a queen. Soon after, her enemies acted swiftly. Rumors of adultery, incest, and treason began to circulate, one tale after another. Those close to her faced arrest, including her own brother, George Bennet. The accusations against Anne Bennet were flimsy at best. The proof seemed unreliable, but in Tudor England, appearances mattered more than truth. Anne was taken into custody and imprisoned in the Tower of London. Her trial turned into a public spectacle, meticulously arranged to guarantee a guilty verdict. She responded with composure and dignity, highlighting the numerous flaws in the charges, yet it did not influence the verdict. She was declared guilty and condemned to death by beheading. On this dull morning, her fate was about to be sealed. The woman who had once worn England's crown was to kneel before the executioner's blade, not because she had failed, but because she had dared to ascend. Anne Bennet had grasped for authority, and for a while she held it tight. King Henry VIII's desire for a son was deeply beyond personal wishes. It had political weight. A male heir would safeguard the throne, the Tudor legacy, and the destiny of England. Without a boy, the entire reason behind Henry's marriage to Anne started to crumble. The king's affection, once fierce, grew cold. Frustration transformed into distance, and then contempt. Anne found herself increasingly isolated at court. The very charm, wit, and bravery that made her adored became the reasons others hoped for her downfall. Among those wishing her demise was Thomas Cromwell, Henry's formidable advisor. Once a supporter of Anne's in the Reformation, Cromwell now regarded her as a danger. By April of 1536, murmurs of conspiracy had begun to spread. The situation escalated once Henry VIII gave his approval, or, at the very least, chose to remain silent. Cromwell initiated an inquiry into Anne Bennet's personal affairs, a scheme that relied not on facts but on hearsay and deceit. On the 2nd of May, Anne was taken into custody and accused of adultery involving 5 men, including her own brother George Bennet, along with plotting the king's demise and committing treason. These allegations were shocking and clearly fabricated. However, within Henry VIII's court, truth held little sway. What counted was reputation, legacy, and removing a queen who no longer fulfilled the king's desires. Anne's trial on the 15th of May was more a spectacle than a pursuit of justice. She was denied legal representation and the opportunity to confront her accusers. The jury consisted mainly of men eager for her downfall. Despite this, Anne maintained her composure, responding to every inquiry with poise and intelligence. Even those opposed to her acknowledged her remarkable presence. One onlooker remarked she spoke with such wisdom and elegance that she appeared less a mere woman than something heavenly. Yet none of this mattered. The verdict was predetermined. Guilty. Initially, the punishment was to be death by burning, a dreadful fate. However, in what many interpreted as either mercy or a strategic move to improve appearances, Henry VIII altered the sentence to beheading. He went so far as to summon an expert swordsman from France, known for swift and precise executions. This offered little solace, but was at least efficient. On the morning of May 19, 1536, Anne awoke fully aware the end was near. She was informed the execution would occur at 8 in the morning and spent her final moments in prayer. She received communion and, steadying herself with quiet resilience, she prepared for what was to come. Yet just as she was set, the execution was postponed until noon. The burden felt harsh. The lingering hours felt endless as she sat alone in her chamber. Anne Bennet was lost in her thoughts, grappling with fear and devotion. She quietly repeated, "Lord, have mercy on me." She pledged on the sacred host that she had never betrayed the king. "For my salvation," she declared, "I am innocent of the accusations for which I was condemned." Those who were present later recalled her remarkable tranquility in those final moments. It was more than mere peace. It was a display of grace and resolve. Anne Bennet refused to let her adversaries rob her of bravery. As the appointed hour approached, the sound of drums resonated through the air, signaling the crowd that the execution was imminent. Anne Bennet bade farewell to her ladies-in-waiting, offering each a small gift: a prayer book, a piece of jewelry, a handkerchief, simple objects now heavy with meaning. "Remember me and how I end," she said softly. This was not a plea for sympathy, but a quiet wish to be recalled not as a disgraced queen, but as a woman of strength. She was then escorted to the scaffold, where about 1,000 people had gathered. The crowd was smaller than expected, and the atmosphere was unusual, marked by a sober and almost mournful silence. Many removed their hats as Anne Bennet passed, a sign of respect. She wore a modest gown of gray and crimson, moving forward with calm dignity. The fierce spirit that had once captivated a king still blazed within her during these final steps. Anne Bennet was permitted to speak. The air was chilly, and the sky above remained a dull gray. She stood upright with her hands clasped, her gaze steady. The silence felt heavy, as if even the birds were holding their breath. She was granted a final opportunity to say something, a last moment before the sword would fall. She neither pleaded nor accused. Instead, she spoke with dignity, not to prove her innocence, but to face death honorably. "Good Christian people," she said, her voice composed and unwavering. "I have come here to die according to the law, and by the law I am condemned. I pray God bless the king and grant him a long reign over you, for never did any prince have a kinder or more loyal subject than I have been." She did not admit to the charges because she knew they were untrue. She did not ask for mercy because none would be given. Rather, she offered forgiveness, even to the man who had betrayed her. Quietly, Anne knelt on the straw floor, removing her headdress. One of her ladies stepped forward to bind a blindfold over her eyes. Anne reached up once to adjust it, then folded her hands again, remaining kneeling. She waited calmly, her back straight and her neck elongated. The French executioner, dressed in black, stood silently beside her. In his hand he held a sword, not the typical axe used in England, but a sharper and swifter blade. He moved without a sound, no drumbeat or announcement to mark the moment, Only a soft movement meant to divert her attention. He gently called for his assistant to bring the sword. Anne turned her head slightly, just a little, and in that moment, everything was over in one single swift action. No cry, no fight, just complete silence. Anne Bennet, Queen of England, mother of the woman who transformed history, was no more. The crowd froze, some wept, others crossed themselves, even those who once wished her gone, now felt the heavy truth of what had occurred. Her body was placed inside a plain arrow chest, the type typically used to store weapons without a coffin or any ceremony. She was interred in the chapel inside the Tower of London, beneath the cold stones she had once walked over as queen. Yet Anne's story did not conclude there. Although her body lay beneath the earth, her legacy soared beyond what even her foes could have expected. The daughter she left behind, Elizabeth, would rise to become one of the most remarkable rulers in history. A queen who reigned for 45 years and ushered in England's golden era, Anne lost her life, but never her cause. She dared to stand in a realm where women were expected to stay silent. She spoke when others remained quiet. She fought for love, power, and belief, and though the cost was her life, she helped reshape a nation. Almost 5 centuries later, her name echoes not only as a tragic figure, but also as a woman who lived and died with bravery. Silenced but never erased, she knelt before the sword, yet stands tall in history. Anne Bennet, Queen Mother, rebel martyr, a life that ended in darkness, yet casts a light that still burns bright today.